Have you heard Pat Patterson talk about the 6 crucial questions we gotta answer when we're writing songs? That means who, what, when, why, how, and where something's happening? They seem like easy questions to answer. After all, a one-word question like where might require a one-word answer. For example, well, it's in a bar or on a dance floor. Or maybe, and that's the most common place of them all, on the street. But is it like in the song like a Rolling Stone? Or is that street more like in Boulevard of Broken Dreams? So as you can see, just including a place for the sake of having it in there isn't enough. So in this session, we are diving into the power of place in your songs, how the right setting can paint vivid pictures in your listener's mind and contribute to the story you tell in your lyrics. And by the end of this video, you will see how the choice of location can transform your lyrics from good to unforgettable. Perhaps you have heard Pat Patterson, a professor at Berklee College of Music, talk about his 6 best friends. That's what he calls them. Whenever he's writing a song, he says he's focusing on answering those 6 questions of who, what, when, where, why, and how. And even though those questions might only deserve a shoulder shrug and so what, there's so much more to them than what you have been told. That's why I want to start exploring them one by one. And we start with the question of where is it happening? The location of where your song's narrative will unfold. And there are 2 ways about how we will tackle this first question of where. The first one is considering the purpose of this question. We will cover how including a place can make your lyrics stronger than you ever thought possible. And in another session, I will show you how to include the place in your writing and the different options you have that no one has ever broken down like this. But that's for another time. In this session now, let's address the first relevant question when it comes to setting the stage and providing some more context as to where the song's story unfolds. After all, defining the place where everything is said that happens in your lyrics narrative can greatly influence how your audience will feel about what is happening and how they feel towards your song's protagonist. Because there's a difference between 2 strangers meeting in a park, in daylight, or in a back alley. There's a difference if someone's at a wedding or at a funeral. There's a difference if someone is running through a desert or through a snowstorm. So let's address where is your song's story taking place? Where is it all happening? And I'll show you 3 ways to use the place to your song's advantage. All focused on the purpose of each one of them, all right? So here's a quick list of why including the setting is so important in your lyrics. I've highlighted the most important one. The place helps to increase the tension, whether that's at the beginning of your song as you set up your song's main character situation, or you use it to complicate the main conflict, or to foreshadow the outcome. There's a lot the place can help you with. It's not there to only set the mood. That's bollocks, okay? The place has a purpose. And as we go through the 3 ways of how you can find the perfect place for your song's context, I will highlight the purpose of each option for you. And at the end of the session, I will go through this here again so you can better understand it. And hey, I'm Melanie Naumann. I've worked as a developmental editor since 2015, and I'm a StoryGrid certified editor since 2019. Everything I'm sharing with you is based on my and the StoryGrid's extensive studies on the craft of storytelling. So there are 3 possibilities when thinking about the setting where you can place your song's main character. You can put your song's main character into a familiar, unfamiliar, or neutral setting. So let's find out what that actually means and what the purpose of each one of those options is and how it affects your story. Option 1 is putting your song's main character into a place or setting they are familiar with. That means they know that place. And if you have them in a familiar environment, then there's no conflict on the inside because they know their way around. To make it interesting, the conflict will come from the outside. So look at your song's main character as a defender of that place. And when a stranger comes into that place, they want that person to conform to their world so that it stays as it is. They don't want their familiar place to get thrown out of balance, out of whack, or be upset. They want it to stay as it is, because that's how they feel comfortable. So what does that mean for your songwriting? Let's go through a couple of examples. As you can see in Gloria Gaynor's song, I Will Survive, the familiar place, her apartment, is used as the place of conflict. The song's all about how to move on after a breakup. and the woman's resolution gets tested by her ex showing up again. But they don't meet on the street or in a bar, someplace where she can avoid him. No, he's standing right there in her apartment. So the apartment, her apartment, is her familiar place, and he is the intruder. She's coming home, and he's already inside. That's a huge shock. And you can see how this guy is all about power. He thinks he can have her back anytime he wants. So he doesn't care that he invades her space and surprises her as she comes home. Putting him right into her apartment creates lots of tension because she cannot avoid him there. That choice of place forces her to deal with him. She has to confront him and her own emotions. Is she really over him? Is she really as strong as she believes she is? So her resolve gets tested there. Furthermore, the choice of place can also show how long someone has already been stuck at a certain place, that they have already become familiar with it, which makes the place merge into the time setting. In Folsom Prison Blues, the protagonist has been in prison for so long that this place is familiar to him now. It's so familiar, he desires a change of scenery, but he's stuck in that place. So the choice of this location helps to illustrate the consequences of what the character did. He cannot even see the sunshine anymore. You can also use the place to contrast where someone used to be and where they ended up. In the song Viva la Vida by Coldplay, the song's main character stays in a familiar place, but the contrast happens through the change in their social position. They are now sweeping the streets that they used to own. So the change of place contributes to showing what has happened in the song's protagonist's life. It also helps to show the outcome and the consequences. In the song Eye of the Tiger, we are back on the streets, but the song's protagonist, the song's main character, is familiar with those streets, and it lets us know that this is the place that has shaped who he has become. So this setting helps us understand where the song's main character is coming from and why he will not sell his passion for glory. So the choice of place helps us understand the song's protagonist better. A familiar place can also be the setting for something new that happens to the song's protagonist. For example, in You Shouldn't Kiss Me Like This, the song's protagonist is surrounded by people who know him because they told him that he and this woman, who is his friend, also make the perfect pair. So they are in a familiar place, surrounded by people they know. And that also turns into a progressive complication for the song's protagonist. After all those familiar people are watching them. This is something that everyone has seen. In the song Living on a Prayer by Bon Jovi, we follow the couple home from work, and we get to experience how their relationship is affected by their bad luck. And by being able to watch them at home at night as they lie in bed, this creates a very intimate setting that allows us to see how much they struggle, what they feel when no one can see them, and how they are able to make it through together. And in the song Lose Yourself by Eminem, we are also in a familiar setting. After all, it's not the protagonist's first rodeo to go up on stage there. He has already made the experience of how it feels to be chewed up and spit out and booed off stage. But staying with that familiar place, where the protagonist has encountered lots of disappointment before, it can also reveal who the song's protagonist is and how they're fighting for their dream. So the choice of place can also be a good way to not only show what's at stake as we encountered in the rest of the lyrics, but we can also see how it becomes an opportunity, like this irresistible destination that is so hard getting to, but so worth pursuing. So the choice of location becomes the key in enabling the protagonist to get what they desire. In the song Solve the Grundy County Auction Incident by John Michael Montgomery, we are at an auction, and the song's protagonist is very familiar with that place and the customs of an auction. He conforms to the way people call out bids for what they want, and he knows the language as he rates how great that woman is. So how he behaves in that place tells us a lot about how familiar he is with it, and he's using it to his advantage to get the attention of that lady. On the other hand, a place can also grow on you or on the song's main character, which allows us to show a positive outcome of how they have changed as a person, just like in the song Welcome to Paradise by Green Day. Here the song's protagonist learns to love a place he has moved to, and the chorus says it best. So choosing that odd place and furthermore including a gunshot, it all shows that this place ain't perfect, but it proves that even an unfamiliar place can turn into your home, into a familiar place. By intentionally making the place sound like it's not the best environment to live in, but a place doesn't need to be perfect for us to be able to call it home. So regarding the song's message, the choice of place in the setting plays an important part. It's also possible that we have that shift the other way around, just like in the song Under the Bridge by Red Hot Chili Peppers. The song's protagonist is in a familiar place in the beginning. They are in the city they love and driving through its streets. But then they get to the bridge downtown, which is away from the familiar place where they felt loved. And that's why they forgot about the city's love and they meet their tragic ending there, because it is an unfamiliar place. So sometimes we can use a change in location to show how the external environment changes and in turn, how that affects the protagonist. Option 2 is about putting your song's main character into a place or setting they are unfamiliar with. That means they do not know that place. They do not know the people, the location, the rules. And if you have them in an unfamiliar environment, they are the intruder who upsets everything because they don't know their way around, which can make them easy game or the source of conflict for other people. In this case, look at the song's protagonist like being a fish out of native water. They are in a place, everything is novel around them, and they have to get to know that place and the people so they can find their way around. And another question is, will they conform to the rules of that new place, or will they differentiate? Will they change that place, or will they be changed by it? So what does that mean for your songwriting? Let's look at a couple of examples. The song Hotel California is a great example for showing the song's protagonist in a place that they are super unfamiliar with. They are a fish out of native water there because they don't know the rules of that place. And it's great that the listener gets to experience alongside the song's protagonist how that place changes. So it's getting the message across that things might seem like one thing in the beginning and then turn out to be the complete opposite. In the song Welcome to the Jungle, the song's protagonist doesn't know her way around. She's easy game for the people in that place, and the stakes are high. She could even die there. This means we can show the stakes through the environment where the song's protagonist finds themselves in. Same is true for the song Another Day in Paradise by Phil Collins. Here you also understand the stakes simply by looking at the location. You can see that the homeless woman in those lyrics has not been living on the streets for long. She doesn't know her way around. And we can see how this contributes to the situation she's in. Her unfamiliarity with where she is raises the stakes and how much her life is threatened, especially when we look at the place and the season of the year. So the environment is threatening to the woman in the song. So imagine we would have chosen a different location. What if we would have said that the sun was shining? Then her need for shelter wouldn't seem that life-threatening. It would actually feel more secure and safe. If that were the case, the environment would be more stable. So the conflict would not arise because of the threatening cold, but it would have to arise mainly between her and the man. So in that case, we would need to put more spice on the conflict between her and the man so that we would care about her and her situation at all. So you see how important the location is to set everything up that you want to get across in your lyrics. In the song Hero of War, the location is somewhere in another country. We don't get the location explicitly mentioned, but from everything we see the protagonists do, like kicking in the door to a place where a man and his family live, we know that they are in an unfamiliar territory. So the location is implied because we get it from the context of all the other things that are happening. He is not becoming a hero of war. On the contrary, he is an unwanted guest, an intruder. Looking at the lyrics of the song Billie Jean by Michael Jackson, we also get the sense that he's not familiar with the place where he's at. After all, he doesn't understand the rules of the place. He's asking, what do you mean I am the one who will dance on the floor and around? He doesn't yet understand this. And using this line, it foreshadows so well what will become of him. Or better, the place he will be stuck in the end. Because with all of his denying, he will end up going in circles again and again. So this literal place takes on a completely different meaning at the end of the song. So regarding our first two options of how we can think about the place that we include in our song lyrics, no matter if you go with an unfamiliar or a familiar place, consider the purpose of that place. How can the place add tension to your song's narrative? How can it create a threat or an opportunity? And is it best to use a familiar place or an unfamiliar one? And by now you might think we've already covered a lot about the place as part of the setting that we create for our song's story. But there are some more things I want to mention. After all, sometimes we are neither in a familiar nor in an unfamiliar place. For example, in the song Stand by Eminem, we start in a familiar setting. The guy is at home and he got the pictures on his wall from his idol. And we know he's at home because the lines say my window and my wall. And when Stan is writing his letters to Slim, we know he does so from the comfort of his own home. He's in a familiar place at the beginning of the song. And in Stan's last verse, he's in his car and doing 90 on the freeway. And the freeway is neither a place where he knows every rock and tree, and it ain't a place he's unfamiliar with, because he's probably gone that way before. After all, he's heading for the bridge, so he knows where it is. And in this case, we are on neutral territory. So we have shifted from a familiar place to neutral territory. And he's heading towards a bridge now. And because the lines are written in present tense, we have a super strong combination of time and place. Now the audience is not just hearing about Stan's situation in the way he writes his letters, but now the listener is right there in the car with the song's protagonist. And so the song, only when we look at Stan now, has already created two places. A calm one that represents his home and safety, where he got the pictures of his idol to remind him that it's not so bad. And then we have that threatening place of driving 90 on the freeway, while he is drunk. And because of his behavior, he is not conforming to the rules anymore. He intentionally breaks them. And so the song, only when we look at Stan, has already created two places. A calm one that represents his home and safety, where he got the pictures of his idol to remind him that it's not so bad. And then we have that threatening place of driving 90 on the freeway while he's drunk. And because of his behavior, he's not conforming to the rules anymore. He intentionally breaks them. He's differentiating from the context of that place. And that also shows us how he breaks out from conforming to what Slim had told him to just write those letters. Stan does not do what he's been told anymore. He's breaking the rules on the freeway, and he's now recording a tape instead of writing a letter. He's differentiating. Great contrast, right? So that change of setting certainly has a large impact on what it makes us feel. So instead of that cassette tape that he's recording live while we're speeding with him towards the bridge, imagine the third verse would just have been another letter, expressing even more of his anger and frustration. We would have said, so what, right? We wouldn't be that much invested, but by having changed the location and how he intentionally breaks the rules, it illustrates his anger even better, and it raises the stakes a lot. Furthermore, as Stan is recording the cassette tape, he also says, I hope you know I ripped all of your pictures off the wall. And without those pictures, there's no reminder left that it's not so bad. Now it is terribly bad. And he's over the edge now. Everything builds up towards the moment of him driving over the bridge and killing himself. So again, you see why it's so important to pay attention to where your song story is taking place and also how the character acts in that environment. Do they conform or do they choose to differentiate, and why? So now you know it's also possible to use neutral territory as a possible place for your song's story. For example, just like in What's Her Name by Green Day, as the song's protagonist thought he ran into that girl from long ago down on the street. And that's a great choice of a location for this incident. After all, it's a place everyone can imagine and that they are all familiar with, and probably it's also the most common place where the audience might have had a similar encounter of thinking they saw someone from long ago and in the next moment they're gone. Turn out that person is not them. So you see, the choice of place does not have to be super specific either. Down on the street is totally valid if it serves the scenario you're trying to create. Sometimes we only need the place so we are able to ground the story somewhere. But even then, choose a place that contributes to the context you're establishing. Even if it's just a rough mention of a street, whatever. Just ground the song's main characters somewhere. Put their feet on the ground so they ain't floating around in an empty space and we cannot even picture them because we don't know where they are. Just by including a place, your audience will be able to visualize your song's story so much better. In Boulevard of Broken Dreams, we are not getting much information about the lonely road the character is walking on, but we are able to place them. We are able to picture them walking down a street. And that's all we need. And we ourselves will then picture the road we've walked on before and where we felt similar. Or we might even be walking somewhere at the same time as we listen to the song. I know that I did that. When I was suddenly all alone in Cairns in Australia and I had no money left, was completely stranded and on my own, then I listened to this song on repeat as I walked through the streets of Cairns, not knowing what I'm going to do. So that's another example of neutral territory. And how mentioning a common place can make the audience feel as if they are the character in that song, going through what they are going through, because they are in a similar location. In The Gambler by Kenny Rogers, the train is also neutral territory. It doesn't belong to us and we don't live there. It's a simple place we need to travel from one place to another. So it's neutral ground, and that's where the song's protagonist meets the gambler, because it's a place of passing through, a place of coincidence or encounters of fate. In the song The Foundations of Decay by My Chemical Romance, the song's protagonist is standing upon a hill. This doesn't seem like a place he's super familiar or unfamiliar with. It's a hill, like somewhere. So it's neutral ground as well, and it serves as a place of perspective. Like it's a place that can overlook the surroundings, just the way the character looks at his life from this overhead perspective. So it doesn't only have a literal meaning, but also a metaphorical one. And as another example, we also encounter neutral territory in the song Last Christmas by Ram. Here we are in a crowded room, which is a great place for imagining how the song's protagonist is trying to hide from her soul of eyes. So choosing a crowded room, being there between his friends who are all so tired they will leave soon, while his ex-girlfriend is also there. And he will, at one point, not be able anymore to avoid her. So that place helps us understand how hard it must be for him to avoid her. So that close setting, just like in I Will Survive, forces the character to confront the problem they'd rather avoid. So knowing that location helps push the protagonist towards dealing with the problem that they're facing. So when we look at everything we've already covered as we went through the examples, it shows us that answering that little question of where has a purpose. You can use that place as part of creating the setting with intention. There's a reason why we choose to include it in the lyrics. It has to serve a purpose. For example, we know the place can represent the real problem of the song's main character, just like in the song Hotel California, because they have a misconception about that place and thus a misconception about the problem that they face. One aspect of that problem was hidden to them, just like one aspect of the place was hidden to them. And once it reveals itself, it's a question of whether or not they can draw the connection to how they have misread their own problem. The character in Hotel California fails in doing so because he only wants to run away. Furthermore, the choice of place can highlight the stakes or the threat to the song's main character, as in Another Day in Paradise or Welcome to the Jungle. The choice of place can also highlight that the protagonist is getting further away from their conscious goal, as we've seen in Hero of War. But the place can also foreshadow the outcome, like in Billie Jean by Michael Jackson, transferring that image from dancing in circles to his ongoing denial that keeps him spinning around. And we've also seen we can switch from an unfamiliar place to a familiar place or vice versa, that show the change that happens in the protagonist's life as we see it in Under the Bridge or Welcome to Paradise. Furthermore, by focusing on where your song's story unfolds, you can also add another level of tension, just like in I Will Survive or Last Christmas, because it's a place where the song's main character has to deal with their problem. They can't avoid that confrontation anymore. Or you can use the place to illustrate the consequences, like in Folsom Prison Blues or Viva la Vida. Including the location in the lyrics can also help the audience understand where the protagonist is coming from, and through that, build sympathy, like in Eye of the Tiger. Or as another possible option, you can reveal the place later on by using it as a progressive complication, as in Toby Keith's You Shouldn't Kiss Me Like This, because the familiar setting with his friends witnessing the kiss makes it impossible for the song's main character to forget about it. They are also forced to deal with it now. And in some cases, the choice of the location can also offer the audience an intimate insight into the character's life. So to say, we get to experience what happens behind closed doors, as in Living on a Prayer by Bon Jovi. And in Lose Yourself by Eminem, the place represents the key or the way to what the protagonist desires. It's the ultimate challenge that he has to overcome to get to a better place. And you can also use the place to show the song's protagonist conforming to the context, just like in Soul, the Grundy County auction incident, or even in Eye of the Tiger. They are both conforming to how everything works in that place because they are familiar with it and its rules. Or you can show how they differentiate from it, as Stan does in Eminem's song Stan. To use that place with great effect and find the place where your song's story can unfold, we focus on answering this simple question of where, because we want to give the audience a sense of that place so that the characters in the song do not float around in an empty space with nothingness surrounding them. We want to ground them somewhere, preferably a place that gives us more insights into the context, so we can anchor them in a place that we can picture in our minds. Because conflict can arise either from a fish out of native water scenario, where the song's protagonist is in an external or internal environment they're new to, or because they are a defender of that place and there's a stranger coming to town. Most importantly, please keep in mind that the chosen place needs to contribute to what you're trying to get across to your audience. Thank you for watching.